Thank you, Emmanuel. Welcome. Lovely that you're joining us today. We've got a maths teacher, we've got a grade 1 teacher.
That's Alex there, and I'm Eleanor. And we are part of the Commonwealth Education Trust team delivering these monthly workshops. We'll start in a minute. Just to make sure that we're letting everyone in. Hi, Faith, Indonesia, exciting. Welcome. Not sure we've had, have you attended one of our workshops before, Faith? I feel like Indonesia is a new exciting adventure for us, actually.
Me too. It's very exciting.
Welcome, welcome. Well, lovely to have you with us, Faith. Thank you. Okay, we'll start in a few seconds, I think. Always keen to stick to time, but Zoom workshops quite hard to stick to time because people sort of come in and it's not like they can open the door and walk into a physical room. Oh, got another Emmanuel joining us now. Fantastic. Okay, so just while we're waiting, you should be able to see the screen in front of you whether you're part of our Zoom call or maybe you are watching us on Facebook Live, because we are now so sophisticated that we are live streaming our Zoom call to our Facebook Live, so we can hopefully reach as many teachers as possible. So while you're waiting, do tell us who you teach, where you're from, and if you've done that, have a look at those words on the screen and consider which of those you think are good to use in lesson objectives. And then we'll start in a couple, not even a couple of minutes, I think we'll start very shortly actually. Welcome, Carol. See who else's names we've got. Sarah. Okay, I think I'll start because it's 3:02 UK time. Welcome everybody, thank you for joining us today for one of our Teach 2030 workshops. My name is Eleanor Sykes, I'm the Educational Lead at the Commonwealth Education Trust, and I'm joined today by two colleagues, Alex Starr and Cheryl Rosario. Alex is the one whose voice you will mostly hear today. She will be pitching in with any questions and comments from you, and I will be talking about how we write meaningful lesson objectives. So maybe you attended our workshop last month, which was all about the purpose of lesson objectives, but today we wanted to focus on how to actually make them meaningful, which is not as easy as it might seem. So on the screen in front of you at the moment, you should be seeing 5 words that you might well use or see in a lesson objective. So explore, understand, describe, compare, and know. So, oh, Emmanuel, fantastic. Look, you're already in there. So these are just words that you might use in some of your lesson objectives. So you wouldn't use necessarily the same one in all of them. But Emmanuel has said he likes the word describe. Emmanuel, I'm going to ask you to hold on to that and we'll come back to that. I would agree with you, but I'd like us to explore why describe is a good word for lesson objectives. So I'm going to come back to those words in a moment. We're just going to go to the next slide. So we've already done our welcome, but just briefly, the purpose of the workshop today is to identify the key purpose of lesson objectives, to construct some lesson objectives, and to consider how to measure the success of your lesson objectives. Okay, so hopefully we'll cover that in the very short amount of time that we have. Please do write any questions or comments. I tend to race a little bit because we're keen to not take up too much time, but sometimes I go too fast. So please do ask any questions. So, what do we think about when we write a lesson plan, first of all? Who am I teaching? What am I teaching? How will I teach it? And do my learners understand? What we're focusing on with our workshop today is the what am I teaching part of the lesson plan, the lesson objective. What is going to be in that lesson, and how will you construct a lesson objective that is helpful to you as a teacher, but also equally helpful to your learners. You may have seen this in our previous workshop. This is a downloadable resource, actually, that you will be sent in our follow-up newsletter as well, on all the key ingredients of an effective lesson plan. And the section that we're focusing on today is this first one with that very delicate big fat red arrow. Is the learning objective specific and connected to previous learning? That is the key question that as teachers we should ask ourselves every time we write a lesson objective. What did I teach previously? How is this lesson connected? Is it clear what I want them to do? Why do they need to learn it? And have I thought through all of the steps? You need to consider all of those when you are actually constructing your learning objective, and we'll explore that and why now. Have a look at this image here. And what issues can you see with the teaching in this lesson? So there's the teacher in the middle. She's asking the question of the learners, what is 5 squared? But if you look at the comments that the learners are saying, what do they suggest about this lesson? What indications do they give us that perhaps this teacher has not thought this lesson through properly? But we were learning about angles yesterday. So the learners cannot see how it's connected the previous day's learning to today's learning. What does squared mean? They simply don't have the knowledge that they need to understand that question. They don't know what the word squared actually means. So how can they possibly answer the question? And the third child, I don't actually know what we're learning about in this lesson. I don't know what the purpose of the lesson is. So the issues in this lesson would be from that one question that the teachers asked, we can tell that their lesson objective was not carefully thought out for them or their learners, because number one, the learners cannot see how it connects to previous learning. Number two, they're being asked a question which they cannot answer as they don't have the previous knowledge that they need to be able to understand this question, to be able to participate in this lesson. And the purpose of the lesson. So actually the lesson objective is not clear. Now, we may hit one or two of these, but we need to be hitting all three when we write a lesson objective. We need to think about how it's going to connect to the previous learning, unless, of course, it is a brand new topic, which, of course, we have to do regularly. So it may well not connect to the learning that they did the week before, but it should always connect to some previous learning they have done, even if it is in previous year groups or grades. We should always make sure that they always need to if we're asking them questions in the lesson, if the activities that we're doing in the lesson, we need to make sure that they actually have the knowledge they need to participate in that lesson, whether or not you refresh at the beginning of the lesson over the language they're going to need, or the information that they're going to need, or the method or the strategy. We need to make sure that actually they have the knowledge they need to be able to work in the lesson that we're about to teach. And the actual purpose of the lesson. What is it we're teaching and why are we teaching it? The learners have to understand that themselves, otherwise they won't know where they're going. And nor will you, and it all becomes a mess. And I speak from many years of experience of this. So the learners need to see the point of the objectives as part of a bigger picture. So I'm sort of slightly hammering this point home, but it's because I believe it's so firmly that the lesson objects, as I just said, it must relate to previous learning, must relate to the topic that they're currently studying, and to the big overall learning goal. So if we go back to that question on what is 5 squared, the overall learning goal would be to explain or to identify how to square a number. So how does the lesson relate to that? All learners must know what they are doing and why what they are learning and why they are learning it. So this is a graphic that Alex has created, which will be in our follow-up email, which we hope you'll find useful. So it's just a look. I find images very useful to me as a teacher. When I had my own classroom, I would have things like this around my desk, just to remind me all the time, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Because there's so many things as a teacher to keep hold of, and I would find little reminders like this quite helpful. So please do feel free to download that. So there is a very well-respected educationalist called Doug Lemov, who is very prominent in the United States, and he's written, well, he's more collated a book, if you like, called Teach Like a Champion, which has identified some incredibly effective teaching strategies. And what we're trying to do is to take some of this information and to adapt it to classrooms and schools globally, where you might have lots of children in your class or not as many resources as you'd like, and so on. And this image, this idea comes from one of his strategies. And I think it's very key when you're planning your lesson, is when you are thinking about what you want, what's happening in your lesson, you need to begin with the end in mind. What are you hoping they will achieve at the end of the lesson? And then that shows you as a teacher the steps you need to do to get there. What do you want them to know? And what do they need to be able to do by the end of the lesson? So I find begin by the end in mind is a really helpful, or begin with the end in mind is a really helpful way of thinking of where are you going in the lesson. So we're now going to have a think. We really would love to get you interacting with us on this one, please. So get your typing fingers ready for the chat. So we've got 2 lesson objectives here. Which one of these would tell the learner what to do or provide evidence that the learner had achieved the learning objective in the lesson? Now, even if you feel that you've got a good idea, really love you to explain why you think that, so that, and please do share it in the chat so that we can get some conversations going. So the first one is to understand how to write a conclusion for a story. And then the second one is to identify the key features of a conclusion and write an example. So which one do you think is the more effective lesson objective? Do you think 1 or 2? To understand how to write a conclusion for a story, or to identify the key features of a conclusion and write an example? Thank you, Nikita. You think 2. Hi, Ah Ying, welcome. You think 2. Can you tell us why? What do you think? I mean, I would agree. I mean, we're all teachers here, so yes, of course it's 2, but why? There's 2 key things that I'm looking for. Spot the teacher here in me. What are the 2 key things that make lesson objective 2 stand out? Okay, Bloom's taxonomy. So where is the word in there that would relate to Bloom's taxonomy? Because you're absolutely spot on, Nikita. But what is the actual word? Where are the differences? Because if we look at the verbs that we're using there, yeah, thank you, Anna Teresa. So we've got understand and identify. So if you as a teacher want to know if your learners have achieved the lesson objective, the point of the lesson, which of those words are you going to actually be able to measure? Understand or identify? Yeah, thank you, Nikita. Write an example, absolutely. Often when we're writing lesson objectives, we can get bogged down in the words like explain. No, explain's okay, actually. Understand, to understand or to know. But how can we as teachers identify if they do understand or if they do know? And in fact, how can the child themselves understand if they do know? But absolutely, Anna Teresa and Emmanuel, thank you very much. You're spot on. Understand is not measurable because we can't be certain they understand. But if we're saying actually what we want them to do is to identify the key features of a conclusion. So you might get them to list that or whatever it is, and then to write an example. That shows you as the teacher, they've identified what they needed to do, and then they've showed me that they know how to do it. So I know that they have got there. So the key words here are actually to understand and to identify. Those are the verbs that are telling us what the learners are going to do in the lesson and that help us then measure. Oh, we've already done that bit. To understand and to identify and write Those are things we can actually see. Have they identified it? Have they written it? Yes, they have. To understand how to write a conclusion, that doesn't actually even specify that they're going to be writing one. So it can help to use the SMART technique when writing lesson objectives. I'm sure you've seen this before. I find it really useful to reflect on it myself. So S, specific. What do you actually want the children to learn? M for measurable. How will you know if they've achieved this? A, is it achievable? Is it actually realistic? Do they have the knowledge or resources they need? Do they have the vocabulary they need to be able to understand and complete this lesson? R, relevant. Does it build on what they already know? Is this knowledge necessary for something else, maybe for the next lesson? And timely. Do they actually have enough time to achieve this lesson objective? So particularly, I would say specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant are the really key ones here. If we go to the next slide here, we've got, this is a resource that you will also receive. I think you will receive it. I think we put it in there.
You will absolutely receive
Thank you,
it.
Alex.
It is there. And it reminds you at the bottom what SMART actually stands for if you do forget. So it does remind you. Look out for it in your post-event material. And also, just before you carry on, actually, Eleanor, R has said the idea of it's concrete. The idea of identify, and I like that word concrete. I think that's really helpful. Absolutely, absolutely, and thank you, Al, for that. You're right, because you want actually rock solid evidence of your judgment. Have the children achieved what you want? Have they learned what they need to learn in this lesson? I find actually things like this incredibly useful, because even when we were planning this workshop, or when we were working on the planning course, which this relates to, I had to sort of really think about some of these words again myself, because it's very easy to say understand, know, and things, but actually you really need to be sure that you can evidence the children's learning. So I think this is very useful here, because they are what you call, well, they're active verbs. So they're verbs that are actually doing, if you like, and that you can measure. And there's loads and loads of examples down here. And we would suggest to stick to these words or similar ones in your lesson objectives, because it's going to make it much simpler to check that, are the children learning, and do they know what they're learning, and can you measure that learning? Right, let's move on to the, I'll go back to that one actually. If we go back to this one here, which is about writing a conclusion for a story, does anybody want to have a go at writing a different lesson objective based around the conclusion for a story using any of these verbs here? Anybody want to have a go at doing that when you put it in the chat? So for instance, you could say to list the key features of a conclusion, or who's got some ideas? Come on, Cheryl and Alex, put you on the spot here. To invent a narrative for the end of the story. Yep. Thank you. It might not be related to a story. If you're not an English teacher, you're a maths teacher. No, yeah, please feel free. If it's something that is not related to your subject, we are asking about the end of a story, but we've got maths teachers and grade 1 teachers in here. If there's something you think is really useful for even next week for a lesson, then do let us know. To inspect the key aspects provided by others. Nikita says, what do you mean by that? Inspect the key aspects provided by others. That somebody else is going to come up with ideas maybe, and you've got to look at their the aspects that they come up with. Are you thinking maybe peer assessment perhaps with that? Ah, got you. Yes, when the class shares conclusions. I mean, inspect is definitely a good word there. I would then look to extend the learning objective a little bit, or the lesson objective, by inspect the key aspects provided by others and identify identify the key elements or the key points or something like that, so that you knew that what they were doing was they were going to be really listening and analysing their classmates, but actually then drilling down, what is it, the key feature or whatever it is that you're doing. To apply the key features in writing their own story, Faith, thank you very much. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I'm aware that we've done nearly at our 15 minutes, and we try really hard to not go over time. What I am going to say to you all now is that we want to continue adapting and improving the way we deliver our workshops. So we're very keen that
our teachers, our participants, so that is all of you, are involved. And what we would really love is for our next workshop, which is in a month's time, for you teachers who have joined us today, is to share some of the lesson objectives that you've written over this next month, and how perhaps your thinking changed after this workshop, and the impact that just a short 15 minutes of reflection on your own teaching has actually just given you a little bit of a reminder, because we all need those as teachers, definitely, all the time. But we would really love your input. So we will hopefully be contacting some of you if you would like us to, if you'd like to share your experiences. Oh yes, thank you. Alex has put my email there. So do please take my email down. And we would really love to hear from you, because we would like to have more of our community involved in the presentation. So it's not just me or Alex or whoever. We want it to be more of you teachers who are actually teaching. So that would be amazing. And then the other thing is, actually, I'll just leave it there while I continue talking, because I think this slide's more useful. Oh, thank you, Emmanuel. Fantastic. Can you put your email in the chat, or just send it to me or to Alex in the chat? We would love that. And the other thing is that we are really keen to try and reach more teachers. So we're asking you if you're able to bring more of your colleagues, your fellow teachers, to these monthly workshops, so that we can really build up our community. And of course, we would like for you all to be enrolled in our courses. We've got a good incentive for you now. In the follow-up email, and I'm going to tell you now, there is a code which will give you free access to part 2 of the planning course, which this workshop relates to. So Alex, if you can just put the name of the workshop in the chat, and not the workshop, the course, sorry. And if you would like to do our course, planning lessons to reach all learners, you just have to use the code August, and you will get part 2 of that course, which normally costs $5. You will get it for free as our thank you for joining our workshop today and for being part of our community. So do please see if you can bring more people to our next workshop, because we would really love that. This code is only going to be sent out today in the newsletter, but in subsequent workshops, we will only be giving the code actually in the workshop itself. It won't even be in the follow-up email. So, you know, you've got to be here to get it. So I've just put it in there. There's the code August in the chat. So to summarize the workshop today, make sure your lesson objectives link to previous learning or clearly introduce the new topic. Ensure the objective is written in language that learners can understand and that they will know when they have achieved it, that they'll know they have got there. Check that the words you use can be measured by you, so that you know, have the learners achieved it or not. Hi Nikita, I see you're saying a letter of participation. Do you mean saying that you have helped us present the workshop?
Do you mean like a certificate, more like a certificate? Is that what you're looking for?
Because we don't have certificates for our workshops, because they are short, voluntary. So we don't have certificates for those, I'm afraid. But I see. We don't at the moment, Nikita. We're aware that this is something that people are interested in, but we haven't quite sussed out the mechanics of that yet. Alex, maybe it's something that we need to think about. I think if you receive the follow-up email, I mean, except you do receive the follow-up email if you haven't attended the course, the workshop, but that is evidence to some extent that you've enrolled into the workshop.
If you're keeping a teacher portfolio, you can write a reflective paragraph as well. Absolutely. on what you've learned, and I'm sure that we can do something for people who contact us to tell us what they've learned from their workship.
Yeah, we need to have a think.
You know, I do a lot of blog writing, so if it is something that we're interested in, we'll have a think and reflect and get back to you on that one.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anything else anybody would like to share with us on writing lesson objectives? We've got, I can see we've got Happinesses, or is it Emmanuel? Sorry, Emmanuel, I'm not sure if Happiness is your first name or your second name, but I'm going to call you Happiness because that's fantastic. We have an email from Happiness, who will definitely be in touch with you, please, Happiness, to see if you would help us with or contribute to our next workshop. In the chat, you'll also see the link to our Planning Lessons to Reach Your Learners workshop. If you use the code August, you will get part 2 for free. Oh, thank you, Nikita. Fantastic, that's great. So my 2 pleas to you would be to spread the word, because we want to try and reach more teachers, and we have lots who sign up, but then inevitably less actually show up on the day. So we would really love you to talk to other teachers in your school, see if you can encourage them to participate. And also please make sure that you enroll in our courses, particularly the planning one, which is what this block of workshops is focused on. And work your way through that course and see what learning it helps you with, or reflection it supports, etc., because we are trying to get more teachers enrolled in our courses as well. That's the purpose of doing these workshops, is to hopefully show you how we can support you as teachers to continue learning and reflecting on your teaching practice. Okay, so there we go. Thank you very much. So brilliant, Emmanuel. Happiness is a grade 1 teacher. She is a colleague I invited her. Thank you. Brilliant. That's what we want to see. So how to continue developing your teaching practice with us? Take our low data and bite-sized courses for teachers just like you. Attend more of our workshops. Follow us, like us on Facebook and YouTube. Our colleague Adam, who is our tech and marketing whiz, has put together a fantastic YouTube channel with lots of videos of our workshops and other little snippets of learning for you to share and enjoy, and sign up to our email.